I can't believe I fell for that.
So, can I get your number?
Smiling back at him, she said,
You know that song by Meghan Trainor, the one where she mentions a two-letter word a lot.
Okay,
he said. They both laughed and smiled at each other, while maintaining eye contact.
Next.
They were at the front of the line. She went before him. As she handed over her boarding pass, TJ hoped she would wait for him so they could continue talking. When she was done, she turned around, winked at him, and walked into the plane. As soon as she walked away, he noticed the gentleman at the boarding counter pick up the microphone to make an announcement.
This is the final boarding call for passenger Daniel Smith booked on flight QR740 to Doha. Please proceed to gate 152 immediately. The final checks are being completed, and the captain will order for the doors of the aircraft to close in approximately 5 minutes' time. I repeat, this is the final boarding call for Daniel Smith. Thank you.
The moment he put down the microphone, TJ handed him the boarding pass, then ran to the plane, hoping to catch Zoe before she took her seat. As fate would have it, a young lady was waiting for him, only it was one of the flight attendants.
Of course,
TJ said. As the flight attendant showed him to his seat, he kept looking back at every seat he passed, hoping to see her as he walked towards his own seat. He remembered that he was in business class and realized that he probably wouldn't see her again.
this close. I was this close to closing with her,
he said as he took his seat. Slamming his fist against the armrest, he decided to close his eyes and sit in silence for a while. He thought back to the time he had with Zoe in the boarding line. In his haste and frustration, he hadn't taken notice of his surroundings. The soft gentleness of his seat awakened him to the comfort of business class.
So this is what 10 grand looks like,
He said in awe, with a hint of disgust. They were in a Carter Airways Boeing 777-00LR. The seats were 180-degree reclining flatbeds. They had a wood-like finish to them, with some delicately done blue lighting along the sides. The air hostesses even offered pajamas for the long flight. A menu followed the PJs. Looking at the menu, passengers had the option of taking up to a 7-course meal. Of course, TJ took all 7 courses. Once he was done eating, he had the option of watching a movie, listening to music, reading a book, or sleeping. Looking back at the day he had, one that had been both physically and mentally draining, he chose to start the trip with some sleep. Before going to sleep, he quickly checked the on-flight status of the trip to see how long the flight would be, 15 hours and 35 minutes. With that motivation, he fell asleep. The remainder of the flight involved a repetitive cycle of sleep, watching a movie, listening to music, reading, and sleeping. Since these were brief moments of sleep, he didn't have to face the familiar struggle of trying to sleep through an entire restless night. With most of the passengers fast asleep, the lights and PA system suddenly turned on for the captain's announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now getting ready for our descent into Doha. We are expected to land at 3:45 a.m. local time, 2 hours later than our scheduled time. Once again, we apologize for the unexpected delay before our departure. It is currently 3:30 a.m. local time. It is 32 degrees Celsius in Doha, with the weather expected to be mostly sunny for the rest of the day, with slight winds. We wish you a pleasant stay in Doha, and we hope to see you again soon. On behalf of all our crew, thank you for choosing to fly with us this evening.
TJ sluggishly began to wake up, opening his eyes. Everyone else seemed to be as groggy as he was. The lights were quite sharp, almost piercing through the retina. As they received instructions to ensure their seats and tray tables were in an upright position, TJ gathered all his belongings, making sure he wasn't leaving anything behind. Once the plane landed, the business class passengers were allowed to exit first. TJ had to move quickly, as his connecting flight was already boarding. The air hostesses were standing at the exit, thanking everyone for flying with them and wishing them a wonderful day. As TJ approached the exit, one of the air hostesses stopped him for a brief moment. She handed him a note, then swiftly continued with her farewell routine, as if nothing was amiss. Perplexed by what had just happened, he quickly opened the note to see its contents. 212634307. Hope to hear from you. Z.
No, she didn't.
TJ said to himself.
Yes,
He exclaimed as he ran to the other side of the airport to reach his boarding gate. He wished he had the time to wait for her, but given the flight delay, he had no choice but to run to catch his connecting flight. He made it before they closed the gate. He felt relief that he managed to avoid the embarrassment of hearing his name called out over the PA system. He was still within the allocated boarding time. As he made his way to find his seat, he was a little less distracted this time. He was able to pay attention to the difference between economy and business class. This plane was smaller than the previous one. Besides the size, all the other features were the same, He didn't spend much time focusing on where he was, though. It was all starting to sink in. His mind was on his destination. He had a few good distractions along the way, but now it was becoming real. Overwhelmed by his thoughts, he tried to give his mind a break. Unfortunately, he couldn't get much sleep on the flight. The only exception was the 20 minutes he did get during the flight's ascent, and that was because of his body's exhaustion from the previous flight. As much as he wanted to sleep during this flight, to give his mind a brief rest, the influx of thoughts denied him that luxury. His brain was in overdrive. Overdrive that was driven by speculation rather than fact and knowledge. He kept thinking about being in a foreign land for the first time, being in a strange environment. How different will it be? To what extent will I stand out as a non-native? Who will I be able to trust, and how will he know whom to trust? Once again, he asked himself about the legitimacy of this whole thing. He remembered reading up on one site that many locals knew how to speak English. He wasn't sure if it was specifically in Kathmandu or other parts of Nepal. He thought about all the movies he had seen where tourists were taken advantage of by locals, particularly Americans. Food was another stress point. What do they eat in Kathmandu? How will my stomach react to the local cuisine? What if I fall ill while I am in Kathmandu? Medical services. Do I have coverage? What is the quality of the health professionals? These questions would continue until the plane touched the ground.